Right, the learning doesn't stop. Come in, get sat down. I hope you're all recharged, refreshed, and ready to go. So this was trailed earlier today. I'm really fascinated by this talk about schema. Please welcome to the stage Richard Wallis from schema.org.
Oh, can you hear me out there? Yes, good, fine. Yeah, I'm not from schema.org. Schema.org is just a cooperation of people putting a vocabulary together, but I know what you mean. You're probably wondering who this random idiot is who stood up in front of you. I often wonder when I look in the mirror. Basically, I'm an evangelist for linked and structured data, and that's got a lot of relevance to this particular audience, growing over time. I've been around computing longer than I'd like to admit. Put it like this, I had a hell of a lot more hair when I started off. A lot of the work I've done has been in the cultural heritage sector, libraries, archives, museums, and the wonders of their data. You think your lives are complicated. You want to get in the back of a library. And been involved with the semantic web and linked data, which underpins all this structured data stuff. I know semantic web was a bit of a terrible phrase a few years ago. People went, evil stuff. But it's actually underpinning a lot of this. More recently, I've been involved with the W3C, running and participating in community groups, looking at expanded structured data vocabularies for different domains, libraries, tourism, finance, etc. And in my spare time, I tend to work with various organisations. I work with Google. I help them with the schema.org site itself and the vocabulary and the documentation that I ran. And then wander around the planet helping people understand this stuff and do training and that. Anyway, back to the reason I'm here. Structured data. It's all about the graph. The graph is the new buzzword that's turned up over the last couple of years. So I think if you went to any stand out there, and more importantly, some of the more huge conferences, if you went to every stand and asked them for their opinion on what the knowledge graph is, they'd all tell you. But behind the scenes, they're all thinking this. Most people don't know what a graph is. A lot of people, you'll say a graph and they imagine one of the display preferences in Excel, for instance. It's all about this sort of graph, where we have a graph of things, entities. You'll hear me talk about things and entities. They're interchangeable in this conversation. So we've got a thing here. It's got a name of Bob. It's a type of person. It was born on the 14th of June 1990. It's got a relationship with another friend, with another thing of type person called Alice. It's interested in yet another thing, which happens to be a work of art called the Mona Lisa that was created by another thing of type person, Leonardo da Vinci. And that's what they call a semantic graph, because of the semantic relationships between the entities that we're dealing with. Here's another graph, the Google Knowledge Graph. Released on May the 16th, 2012, quite a long time ago. It's been around for a while, with its headline, Things Not Strings. Up until that time, anything you were trying to do to find stuff on the web was all to do with strings found on web pages. This one, I'm not going to read all this, but basically its knowledge graph enables you to search for things, people, places, geographical features, celestial objects, whatever, and get information that's relevant to your query. What they're saying here is actually it's relevant to the thing that they found. And this is the incarnation of the knowledge graph that we all are used to, the knowledge panel that turns up on many SERPs pages. Where, I'm clicking well. So this is giving you a description of a thing that happens to be called the Taj Mahal. It's got an address, an attribute of it. It's got a height attribute. It's got a when it was opened attribute. Here we got some relationships, though, to other things, links to the architects, the two guys that designed the place. And those are links off to other things. But it's not only the knowledge panel that drives it. There's the infamous rich snippet, where attributes of a thing are being displayed along with its search results. So information like, this is a recipe, so it takes 35 minutes to cook. It's got ratings, got an image, all attributes to add value to the thing. And talking about attributes, if Google can identify not only the thing you're looking for, but an attribute of that thing, it'll do something like this. So I'm asking for the height of Mount Everest. It's an attribute of that thing, Mount Everest. So they feature that right to the forefront to answer your particular question. But we also get lists of things. Here's a search from cinemas in Manchester. This isn't a list of web pages. This is a list of things of type cinema, each with images that go with them. God, this thing's out of focus, isn't it? And links to what's showing at those cinemas, and they've each got location information, enables them to be represented on a map. Equally, if you've got an article, here's an interesting article, it might be useful for some of you. How to become a search engine optimization specialist. You never know if you want a hobby. Yeah? Right. Okay. How do we get a drink? Anyway, we'll see how we get a drink in a minute. I've got a laser pointer somewhere. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to use that. Anyway. So here we have, we've got an article. The article is an entity in its own right, with not only a title, but various bits of information to go with it. A very well featured entity type on Google is the event. Oh, I'm getting loud now. So here we have, I've done a search of what's on in Manchester, filtered it down by next month, and I've got a list of entities of type event with their own attributes. So if you pick this, the second one down, if you're here on the 16th of the next month, it's Oktoberfest. Get yourself some beer in. And it's got information about when and where and link to where you get tickets. Question is, where did they get that information from? They got it from this delightfully looking website. That's been well designed, in my opinion, of course. But there's no obvious sign of that information until you start sniffing the data that's been embedded in the page. And I've got a Chrome plugin that sniffs out the structured or linked data that's embedded in that page. So we've got, it's saying it's type, schema fetchable, it's got a description, it's got an end date, it's got an image, it's got a location, it's got maximum capacities, and it's got some links here to offers and various bits and pieces. If you look down here, we've got a type of performing group, German Umpire Band. So Oktoberfest for your German Umpire Band. And this is where there's some offers from tickets with prices and currencies and that kind of stuff. So before we got into this kind of stuff, we were used to a world based on the search index, or indexes, an index of strings, reference to the pages that they came from. Pages are ranked, and I don't have to tell you lot about ranking pages, but that helped order the search results with the objective of providing some choices to the user to then go somewhere else, click on a web page, etc. Whereas the knowledge graph, thank you, is a data set of things, entities, with descriptions of those entities, attributes of the entities, so height, colour, weight, date of birth, that kind of stuff. Relationships between things, so the author of a book, the offerer of a product, etc. And hopefully authoritative relationships. Somebody on earlier on talking about how they enjoy reading Google patents. There's quite a few around in this area talking about how they identify an authoritative description of a thing. And they're also interested in the context of the things. What's it related to? And it's there to power rich content, which we've seen, but it's also there to drive context-relevant answers. So the who, the where, the what, the how. Those questions that come back with an entity being the answer. And this is a semantic graph, like the first one I showed. Both of them populated by Googlebot. So, in effect, these are two separate pieces of infrastructure, one being filled with strings and relationships to the page they came from, the other one being filled with entity descriptions and their relationships. Kind of in theory, they're two separate things. They intermingle, of course. Both populated by Googlebot. So, the question is, I'd quite like my stuff to be in the knowledge graph to see if I can become the answer to some of these questions. Step one is actually SEO. Get your pages crawled and indexed, because it's those pages that carry the structured data that you've been embedded. So if Google doesn't find your page useful, it's unlikely they will import the structured data that goes with it. So very often when I'm talking to people and say, how do I get stuff into the knowledge graph? I say, well, sort your SEO out first. I'm surprised they crawl anything on your site, ... Step two, structured data. Describe the things the pages are about as against the pages themselves. A lot of people, especially in this industry, because we're there to try and get pages featured, miss the point here. Describe the thing, not necessarily the page it's on. Use schema.org, which is the vocabulary that Google and the others require, and then relate these things you're describing to other things. The author of a book or the publisher of an article is a person or an organisation that needs describing. Don't just provide the author's name and hope Google will work out who the heck it is. Mark up all your entities on your site, including your organisation, and link them together. A lot of people miss the point. They say, well, it's my website with my stuff on, so Google kind of knows that, don't they? Describe your organisation. Don't worry about lists. One of the things you have to imagine is when Google has crawled all your website and all your structured data, intervening lists of all the red versions of a particular project or the most popular versions of a particular product is not that much of interest for them because they will have got the product page. And preferably use JSON-LD, which is one of the syntaxes for supplying the structured data. There are 2 or 3. Google preferred JSON-LD and it's becoming an industry standard. This is where I need another arm. Thank you. Right. A little bit of practical. And this is very simple. So here is mytourist.org, an imaginary website. Let's put some structured data in the home page. Excuse me. So we've told them, the person consuming this data, i.e. Google, that it's schema.org, it's a travel agency, it's got a name of mytourist.org, and it's got a URL. Also on my site is a page about a person, Bob the expert. He's schema.org, he's a person, he's got a name, he's got an alternative name and a URL. Also on our site, we've got an article. Excuse me. Type article, name, weekends in Paris, author, Bob the expert, about Paris, and a URL. And to finish the site off nicely, we've got a page about a place, Paris, saying it's a city and it's a tourist destination. Things can be of multiple types. Name of Paris, URL. So if we put those together as a site, we've kind of got a site of unconnected entities. They kind of vaguely refer to each other, but there's no real connection. So let's pull it apart and see what we can do to improve that situation. So here in the organisation, I've added an employee attribute with a link to Bob. Notice I'm using the URL or URI of Bob's reference, not his name. Equally, we add to Bob's description who he works for. So we've got a works for attribute pointing back to the organisation. As I say, this is very simplistic. This is giving you some links to start to bring things together. With the article, we've changed the author from just being his name to being the link to Bob's description. About, instead of just being Paris as a string, is a link to the Paris reference. And we've added in the publisher is the organisation. And finally, with Paris, we've said it's subject of this article. So we've now got some interconnecting links so that when we bring the site together, we have a very basic graph of entities with their attributes all interconnected together. So what we'd quite like to do is to get them into Google Knowledge Graph. So Googlebot hopefully crawls the pages, and we're in a position where our entities can live alongside all the other entities that they've aggregated into Google Knowledge Graph. And we could possibly be included. If I put myself in the place of the bit of software that's analysing my pages, yeah, they're interconnected with each other, but what are they in the real world? How are they relevant to everywhere else? Let's add a little bit more to help the Googlebot and the artificial intelligence that's loading the knowledge graph. So the first thing I do, I've given this entity an identifier. So that identifier means that organisation. In this case, it actually is the same as the web page address. But if we move the website or move things around, that identifier should stay static. We've also said that mytourist.org is part of a group of organisations, so we've got parent organisation linking to an external site. Over on Bob's side of things, where are we? Here we go. We've given him an ID, and this is more key if you reformat your website and the person pages move around. You want his ID to stay the same if you reformat your site, so all the information and relationships to it stay the same. We've also put in a same as link to his LinkedIn address, or it equally could have been the home page on his blog or something like that. Down in article land, we've given it an ID as well. And this article, as well as being published on this website, is part of a tourism journal. So we've said this article is also part of a journal. So we're connecting to an external website. And finally, over in the place, we've given our description of Paris an identifier, and we've said it's same as a description in an authoritative website called GeoNames, which gives authoritative identification for places all around the world, and equally Wikidata, which is the structured data version of Wikipedia. So now we've got links to the outside world that allow us to merge in with context to the other entities that are currently in Knowledge Graph. So potentially these, you can't say will do. I can't stand up here and say will do, but I'd say it's got a much better chance than previously that these recognisable entities could be included in the Knowledge Graph. So the question is, why do you want to do this? Well, here's a scenario. Google Home. Hey Google, where can I get me a chicken chow mein takeout? This is a fairly standard question that you get most evenings on Google Home, I should imagine. And I should imagine at SEO conferences, you've seen descriptions of what query analysis goes on, where a search like that is analysed and say, well, he said, where can I get? So he's going to be looking for a location or possibly an offering organisation as an answer. Chicken chow mein, well, it's a thing, isn't it, of some sort. Takeout, a type of service that they recognise. And of course, in the background, you've got the date, the time, and the location the query is happening. So we've got quite a bit of context around this query from this guy talking to Google Home. And this is where the knowledge graph comes in, providing the raw material for what I would call potential answer analysis. So it's looking for offers for things. Things of type chicken chow mein. Is that an authority description, or is it a random web page we've found with a description of chicken chow mein on it? It's not relevant to anybody. Or is it one that's referenced an authoritative description of chicken chow mein, maybe in Wikipedia or a recipe site or whatever? Has this got good reviews? Has this chicken chow mein that we're talking about here got any reviews at all? If they are they any good? Is it being offered by a business? that happens to be located nearby the user? Is it an authoritative brand? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's your famous 1,000 sub-entity chicken chow mein provider in the country. It could just be an authoritative site that this information is coming from. Does the offer link to an organisation that provides a takeout service? And the key one that people often miss, is it open at this time in the morning? And if this organisation has matched all these, has it got any reviews, and are they good reviews? So the answer is the best match of query context to the context of knowledge graph entities. So what they're doing in the background is matching these entity types with entities that are closely associated with those entity types that are lurking in the knowledge graph. So in a bit of a summary, the structured descriptions of things on your site can form a semantic graph. They very often don't. People just throw schema.org data at a page and hope. Use links between the entities as references, not strings. The knowledge graph wants to include your entities from your graph. I mean, the ambition is to have the whole planet described in knowledge graphs and search indexes. So they want your data, but ideally wants them in context with the rest of their world. So if you've got a place, link to a better description of it. If you've got an organisation, link to the Wikipedia page for that organisation. Use schema.org and preferably JSON-LD syntax. That isn't just a personal preference. JSON-LD syntax lives in a block of code in your web page. The other syntax is a randomly scattered in microdata or RDFA amongst HTML. And the web designer says, well, let's just move this bit down here, and it totally screws your data up. So go for JSON-LD at preference. Use the checking tools. Google supplies the structured data testing tool and the rich results testing tools to check whether your data is valid. Don't worry too much about page and site descriptions or lists of things. You have to remember they should have crawled all of the structured data on your site, and you have to think about your site holistically in the structure that's on those sites. A slight warning, direct linking from answers may negatively influence your traffic stats. Got me reading teeth in, sorry. It just affects the style of traffic to your site because people will tend to come in directly to an answer and then leave. Or they're not coming in higher up your site and spending ages wandering around looking for the answer. So it may affect your stats. And also, it's not just Google. Bing, Yahoo, Apple, Amazon, and many others have knowledge graphs. Oh, that was the one page we didn't check on the new. That's PowerPoint for you. So I don't know what that says. Oh. It says schema.org is much more than sexy keywords, I think is what it said. Then it says structured data powers far more than rich snippets. A lot of people seem to think rich snippets and that's it. There's a hell of a lot more going on behind the scenes with there. Let's see if we can read the next one. It's not rocket science, and it isn't. Most of this stuff is comparatively simple. It was no more difficult to get your head around this than when CSS turned up for the first time. It just requires a bit of insight, experience, and understanding, I think is what it said there. Let's go to a page that's not scribbled up. That was it, all about structured data in the graph. This slide deck's on SlideShare if you want it. Thank you very much.